Hello, welcome to the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2026. Today is day 28. It's travel day, and it's our last day of the month when we read all month during February. And today is our last day. It's travel day. We have made quite the journey this month with all the different genres and different books that we've introduced and or that we've read from this month. And so we are here on day 28, travel day, and we are glad to be here because our voice held up this year and we're really thankful about that. And we want to remind you why we read here the International Great Black Read Aloud Day. We are here giving voice to words written by Black people all around the world. But in addition to that, we are on a mission to encourage the exploration, purchase, and reading of books written by Black people. We want to encourage you to explore the diverse um, world of Black literature. There are books written on every single subject out here, um, pretty much on everything by a Black person. And so we want you to explore the world of Black literature. And so that is why we give voice to words here um, at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day, or TIGBRAD as we call it. Well, my name is LD Robinson, and I am your reader for tonight. And so we are getting ready to read for day 28, which is travel day. And our selection for today is before we do that, we want to make sure that we get you to follow us online at Black Read Aloud. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. These are all our platforms, and we're at Black Read Aloud. Today is travel day, and our selection for today, we're going to put up the cover here. Our selection for today is a true travel log, if you will, and it is Overground Railroad, The Green Book and the Roots of Black Travel in America by Candacy Taylor. Overground Railroad. Okay. And we're back here and we're going to read. We're going to read from our selection today, Overground Railroad, The Green Book, and the Roots of Black Travel in America. And this is a very interesting book. So we're going to start with our introduction first, and then we're going to move to a couple other parts, which I think are, will help us uh, understand what the author is saying. And obviously, some of these things may resonate with us. Don't you dare say a word. Ron was sitting in the back seat of his father, in the back seat as his father pulled the car to a stop at the side of the road. His father had told him to be quiet before, but this was the first time Ron felt the words reverberate to the pit of his stomach. Moments later, the sheriff stood over the well-appointed 1953 Chevy sedan, complete with all the modern features you read about in the magazines. Where do you get this vehicle? What are you doing here? And who are these people with you? The sheriff asked. Ron's father answered, It's my employer's car. He pointed to his wife sitting upright and expressionless in the passenger seat. He pretended that she wasn't his wife and said, This is my employer's maid, and that is her son in the back. I'm taking them home. The sheriff took a long, hard look at Ron's mother and then angled his eyes to the back seat. And young Ronald sat tight-lipped, too afraid to turn his head or even take a breath. Where's your hat? The sheriff barked at Ron's dad. Hanging up right behind me in the back seat, officer. The sheriff waved. All right, move on. As they drove north across the Tennessee border, a sad, eerie silence hung in the air. The jovial conversation they were having right before the sheriff pulled them over had stopped dead. And although there was no discussion about what had just happened, the gravity of the situation was clear. The gravity of the situation was clear. Ron watched Daddy and Mama exchange knowing glances and then turned his head to look at the black, unassuming cap that had been hanging next to him in the back seat ever since he could remember. It wasn't until that moment that he realized why he had never seen his father wearing it. Mama wasn't a maid, and Daddy wasn't a driver. He had a good job with the railroad, and this was their family car. Until that day, Ron never paid attention to that cat, but now he realized that it wasn't just any hat. It was a chauffeur's hat, a ruse, a prop, a lifesaver. During the Jim Crow era, the chauffeur's hat was a perfect cover for every middle class black man pulled over and harassed by the police. If Ron's father had told the sheriff the truth, that he was driving his own car and that they were a family on vacation, the sheriff wouldn't have believed him. He would have assumed the car was stolen. In the event that the sheriff did believe it was Ron's father's car, the rage and jealousy he might have felt at the thought of a black man owning a nicer car than the police officer might have triggered a beating, torture, or even murder. From that day on, Ron noticed these hats strategically placed, like unarmed weapons, in the back seat of nearly every man's black car. Standing in the kitchen between the sage speckled countertop and the wall mounted oven, I listened to Ron's story, stone faced. Everybody had one, he said, referring to the chauffeur's cap, and you always kept it in the car. And then, without any provocation, other stories about his days growing up in Tennessee tumbled out. Ron talked about his cousin slipping out of town in the middle of the night because a Ku Klux Klan was set to lynch him. I listened with a knot in my stomach, trying to swallow my rage and sadness before tears filled my eyes. I didn't want my emotions to distract him from telling his story. Ron Burford was my stepfather. I had known this man for more than 30 years, but this was the first time he had told me anything about the pain of growing up in the Jim Crow South. And it's not that he was a quiet man. Ron loved to talk. He could talk for hours. My mom and my sister and I would try to scoot out of the kitchen before he started in on another one of his long southern yarns, ones that we had heard before. But it wasn't until I started this project that he shared these stories with me. It was only then, at the age of 46, that I realized I had earned his trust. This was a huge accomplishment because after what he and most black men of his generation had lived through in this country, he felt he couldn't trust anyone. I think Ron started to trust me around 2014, soon after I called home asking about the Green Book. I had just seen a copy of it for the first time, tucked away under glass at the Archery Museum of the American West in Los Angeles. It was a travel guide that was published for black people during the Jim Crow era. I'd never known such a thing existed. Right after leaving the archery, I called my parents in Columbus, Ohio, and asked Ron if he had ever used the Green Book. He said, I'm not sure, probably. There were a few black guides back then. He was right. There were about a dozen other black travel guides, but the Green Book was in print for the longest period of time and had the widest readership. Victor Hugo Green, a man with a seventh grade education, published the first Green Book in Harlem in 1936, and he worked on it until his death in 1960. His wife, Alma, took up the mantle and kept the Green Book going until 1962. In 1965, Langley Waller, an engraver and former writer for Harlem's newspaper, the New York Amsterdam News, published the last two editions of the Green Book, the 1963 to 64 and 1966 to 67 editions. There was no 65 edition. Although these are distinctly different in design, scope, and tone from the original, what never wavered throughout the life of the Green Book was the courage and security it afforded black people so they could pack up their cars and go. Listings in the Green Book blanketed the entire United States, and later editions included Canada, the Virgin Islands, Europe, and Africa. The guide was distributed by mail order, sold by black-owned businesses, and made available through a savvy media campaign led by Esso gas stations, which operate as ExxonMobil today. It was successful due to word of mouth, but also as a result of ambitious grassroots operations of a national network of network of mailmen led by the guy's creator and fellow postal worker, Victor Hugo Green. This multi pronged marketing strategy was so effective that by 1962, the Green Book had a circulation of nearly 2 million. The Green Book was published during a time when car travel symbolized freedom in America. But since, but since racial segregation was in full force throughout the country, the open road wasn't open to all. When black motorists picked up a copy of the Green Book, they were greeted by the words, "Just what you have been looking for. Now we can all travel without embarrassment." The Green Book was called the AAA Guide for Black People, but it was so much more. The businesses listed in it were critical sources of refuge along lonely stretches of America's perilously empty roads. To stay safe, Black folks never left home without a plan, props, a cover story, and a copy of the Green Book. Given the violence that given the violence that black travelers encountered on the road, the Green Book was an ingenious solution to a horrific problem. It represented the fundamental optimism of a race of people facing tyranny and terrorism. When I first saw it, I was struck that something so simple and so practical could be so powerful. Not only did it show black travelers where they could go, but it was also a compelling marketing tool that supported black owned businesses and celebrated black self sufficiency and entrepreneurship. In the early 1930s, right before the Green Book was first published, black Americans had banded together to create the "Don't Buy Where You Can't Work" campaign. Once they understood the impact of the reach of their collective economic power, the campaign galvanized black communities to boycott businesses that wouldn't hire them. So when the Green Book came along, it became the perfect vehicle to carry this effort forward because it was practically a yellow pages of black owned businesses. By 1930, blacks in the United States owned approximately 70,000 small businesses, and over the Green Book's nearly 30-year reign, it listed more than 9,500 of these, including hotels, restaurants, gas stations, department stores, tailors, nightclubs, drugstores, hair salons, haberdashers, sanitariums, funeral homes, real estate offices, and even a dude ranch. More than 80% of the listings were clustered in traditional African American neighborhoods such as Harlem, South Central Los Angeles, and Bronzeville in Chicago. The majority were black owned, but there were also some black friendly white owned establishments such as Macy's, Brooks Brothers, the Drake Hotel in Chicago, the Hotel Bel Air in Los Angeles, and even Disneyland. Although the Green Book provided safe accommodation for black travelers, this solved only half the problem. Getting there could be dangerous, life threatening. Getting there could be a dangerous, life threatening proposition. Not only did black motorists navigate a country with thousands of sundown towns, all white communities that banned black people from entering the city limits after dark, but they also couldn't eat, sleep, or buy gasoline at many white owned businesses. Even Coca Cola vending machines had white customers only printed on them. To avoid the humiliation of being denied basic services, many black motorists were forced to travel with ice coolers, bedding, portable toilets, and full gas cans. Herbert Salamane of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, remembers as a child smelling the odor of gasoline coming from the trunk. "You don't forget the smells," he said. Despite the dangers, black motorists hit the road anyway, venturing out on the desolate two-lane highways that connected urban and rural America. It wasn't until I started this project that I understood why each time I left for the airport after visiting my parents in Ohio, Ron would try to load me up with food for the trip. I'd say, "No thanks, I can just pick something up at the airport." Until I started writing this book, I hadn't realized what a privileged statement that was. Black folks of Ron's generation never left on a trip without taking food because there was no guarantee they would be served anywhere. Ron knew intellectually that times had changed, but his survival instincts had never left him. While working on this book, I came to understand why Ron was so guarded, especially around white people. When I was young, he had never talked about the rules that governed his life growing up in the Jim Crow South. Later, he told me that he had been taught to never look a white person in the eye, and if a white person walked toward him on the street, he would have to cross immediately, or there could be grave consequences, like what had happened to his cousin who had a KKK lynch mob after him. As a teenager, I would roll my eyes at Ron's relentless suspicion of people, which I felt verged on paranoia. But after hearing his stories, I finally understood why he had every reason to doubt, question, and side eye a situation that didn't pass his smell test. I don't think all his fears were warranted, but now I wholeheartedly understand why he had them. Ron died the week I started writing this book. He lost his life from complications due to overexposure to Agent Orange during his service as a Marine in Vietnam. His voracious lifelong love affair with Southern food, or what he called good living, also likely contributed to his death. It was heartbreaking to lose him at such a pivotal point in the project, but when people die, it calls us to look back on their lives, and it wasn't until he died that I realized how much of Ron's life experiences touched nearly every chapter of this book. We talked more the year before he died than we had at any other time in our lives. I suspect he knew he was dying, but he didn't tell anyone. When I was home visiting during this period, almost every evening, at a time when he would normally have gone downstairs to his man cave, instead, he would sit with me on the couch and show me pictures and tell me stories. Ron was so proud of the work I was doing. He told me this book had to be the most important thing in my life. Don't worry about anything else, he said. Don't let anything distract you. You don't need to be out there gallivanting, using his favorite word for what I did. Just sit still, be quiet, and write this book. I had already written two other books, but he and I knew this one was different. After learning about the Green Book, I, a black woman who has driven over 500,000 miles documenting American culture over the last 20 years, never looked at travel or even America the same way again. As I grieved Ron's passing, I wrote every morning, watching the sun rise across the Bisbee, Arizona mountains. I recounted all the conversations we'd had, and just like that, as Ron guided me through every page, he went from being my guardian to being my guardian angel. The year before Ron died, Donald Trump's presidential inauguration sent Democrats over the edge, confirming that their worst nightmare was coming true. Later that year, white supremacists stormed Charlottesville, Virginia, and murdered 32-year-old protester Heather Heyer. I'm not surprised, Ron told me over the phone. In a calm, steady voice, he said, people don't want to see what's right in front of them. I didn't say anything. I just let the sentence hang in the air. After passing the sixth Confederate flag that day while driving through upstate New York, I wasn't surprised either. Most Americans, however, were stunned. They insisted that this was not the America they knew. They were confused and devastated that the country they were so proud of was not living up to its promise of, quote, freedom and justice for all, end quote. Many of my black friends called me and said, well, here we go again, and this is nothing new. But most of my white friends called me in tears. They were incensed by Trump's racist rhetoric and terrified that we were losing the progress we had made as a country since the election of Barack Obama. I shared their anger, but I wonder why they hadn't already felt outraged. One white friend said with hysteria in her voice, I'm afraid they're going to round up all the Muslims. I said, where have you been? For the past 40 years, black folks have been rounded up and imprisoned under the watch of President Bill Clinton, the Bushes, and Barack Obama. No one seems to care about that. Once I hit the road scouting Green Book listings, I drove nearly 40,000 miles on America's two-lane highways, across acres of wide open plains and deserts, over mountains and along coastlines, but I also passed miles of blight and boarded up buildings, in Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland. After seeing communities decimated by poverty, crime, and destructive government policies, I was bewildered, brokenhearted, and then furious that human beings were living in such inhumane conditions. Ron was my comrade while I was on the road researching this book. We spoke regularly on the phone, and as he requested, I texted home every day, giving him detailed accounts of my travels. He was worried for my safety, and I couldn't blame him. He had every reason to be concerned, but he never discouraged me from doing this work. Instead, he supplied me with a stun gun, a knife, and a canister of mace, and then he taught me how to use them. On the road, I was verbally threatened, chased by dogs, physically lunged at, and nearly physically assaulted. I understood the risks and took things one day at a time. The only moment I really feared for my life was when I was scouting Green Book sites on the south side of Chicago. 53 people had been shot the same weekend I was there. Although I was trained in model mugging, a program of self-defense for women, and Ron had taught me self-defense techniques, there was nothing I could do to stop a stray bullet. On the days when I was too nervous to get out of my car to pump gas, or the times when it was too dangerous to stand on the streets to photograph sights, I thought, isn't this ironic? The whole point of the Green Book was to keep black motorists safe on the road, and it's 80 years later, and I can't find a safe place to use the bathroom. That has been our selection from Overground Railroad, the Green Book, I'm sorry, Overground Railroad, the Green Book, and the Roots of Black Travel in America. And it is a very good and interesting read. There are photos of different places, of different sites that were in the Green Book, and it's sobering. As someone who used to travel, I was conscious of where I would be and where I would land at night. I always wanted to be, if possible, in a big city, or at least a good sized city, um, as a single black woman traveling. And so the import of the Green Book, when I learned about the Green Book a number of years ago, was very, I could certainly see the use for it, having traveled across the country and in almost all the states. And so you see a lot of things out there on the road, and a lot of things haven't changed. And so um, this is a good book. It's a reminder that we are to vigilant about our own safety, and our own well-being and that of our loved ones. It's one of the reasons why even I traveled. If I went somewhere that was out of the norm of just day-to-day running, I would always call home and tell my family, my typically my mom or my sister, um, that I would tell them where I was going to be, where I was going, and what I was doing, because it was important to me, and it is still important today. I rarely even go somewhere without either being on the phone with someone while I'm going and someone knows where I'm going, or telling someone where I'm going ahead of time. It's not a matter of control, it's a matter of safety. And so I want to encourage you, if you are someone who leaves home and no one knows where you are, um, start telling people where you're going. It's important. Um, they care, someone out here cares about you. I know I do. So start telling people where you're going. It's not a matter of control per se, but it's also knowing where someone is. I mean, things happen, and they are not always. Not everyone has right motives and right intents. So enough off my soapbox on why you should tell people where you're going when you leave home. Um, this has been day 28, and we want to give a round of applause. I don't have any clap things, those background clap things, but I want to give us a clap We made it through day 28. We read 28 different genres this year. And so we hadn't done that, I don't think, since our first year. We've been cut short by voices going out, and this year we made it all the way through. So thank you so very much for listening to the International Great Black Read Aloud Day. As we have covered all kinds of genre, we've had interviews, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful year. We'll do a recap here in the next couple of days once we get everything together, and we'll put a recap out there, and you'll be able to go to our website and check things out there as well. We'll have that back up. That got interrupted, so have that back up for you, and you'll be able to see all the covers and all the titles from all the different years. From all 6 years, you'll have the information there for you. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for buying Black books. Thank you for purchasing them. And thank you thank you for the support. We really appreciate it. We don't take it for granted in any way. Um, we hope that you have been enjoying these as much as we have enjoyed them for 6 years. And we plan to do things throughout this year, and we believe we'll get to them this year. So thank you for your support of the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2026. Thank you.